Hey Alpha fam, welcome back to another episode of Alpha Commission. Today on Alpha Commission, of course, we're going to go over that price action on the Bitcoin chart where we were determining in the last episode that it was likely that the bear case is increasing. Now, of course, we're still in a very strong market. We can see, of course, that this is bullish structure. And from a diagonal perspective, which I'll show you in a bit, we have broken out. And maybe this pullback just qualifies as kind of a bullish back test. However, the signals that we were looking at remain valid, and of course we are getting that consolidation pullback. And if we do establish additional drives of bearish divergence, then of course we'll be on the lookout for some type of potential breakdown coming up. However, we're not there yet, and currently we are still grinding sideways with an orientation to the upside. Now, a lot of this pattern structure here is getting really complicated. In the back of our mind, we have this big bearish shark. All right, this bearish shark, of course, is threatening to eventually pull us to the downside pretty deeply towards the 80s or 90s if we ever do lose that 110. And definitely if we lose that 100K level, then that bearish shark could come into play. However, we also have this really bullish accumulation going on here. Now, this does have the slight appearance of a rising wedge, but it also is related to an accumulation wedge. This is a very nice accumulation, and until proven otherwise, as long as we're breaking out and just having a backtest, I still would expect it to be impulsing parabolically. Now, sometimes these shapes that we measure on horizontals, they can sometimes have a slight diagonal look to them when you're going parabolic. Okay, that's just the nature of moving parabolically. So I'm not going to put down this accumulation structure here. I'm still going to be looking to the upside as long as we're holding the neckline. And that neckline is effectively above 110K. Now, as long as we're above 110K, of course, I'm just looking for a bullish backtest, especially if we establish that above this 115, 116K, which we have not violated yet. And what I'd be looking forward to is a bit of a bull flag, right? Breakout, continuing to impulse to the upside. And so I still have my sights set on 126K, 146K potentially, where we're just putting in another mini bull flag here. That's where we get that 126. And then, of course, the big move, right? The big daddy move from this gigantic accumulation, that's going to be perhaps in the 140s. So again, guys, just because we have bearish signs starting to stack up does not mean that we're bearish. It just means that we are going to be watching our positions carefully. And of course, you know, the market could be skittish, right? Because a lot of this is bot driven, a lot of this is algo driven, and any of these bearish divergences that are stacking up, any type of pullbacks, you know, any kind of bearish candles, for example, we had this topping tail candle back here. It just, you know, sends the market algos, the market AIs, right? Those type of things. The bots into their mode of selling. And so we're seeing these little sell-offs until strength comes back into the market. Now, I don't think that that strength is going to come back into the market until we're done with this little drama between Trump and the Federal Reserve Chairman. Now, you know, the market is betting that there's going to be no interest rate cuts in July. However, there is a slight advantage to cuts in September. What that means is that if the Fed does cut interest rates this week, that we could dramatically surprise to the upside. That's where this bull flag could suddenly break out, right? After this little fake out here, it could break out to the upside, and we could see some interesting prices on BTC. Now, you know, does that just end up in another drive of bearish divergence that eventually breaks down? Yes, of course, that's possible, but that could be just a greater backtest again, as long as we're above that 110 area. Now, do we have a little bit of wiggle room here? Yeah, we do. We have this this crab harmonic right here, which does suggest that, yeah, we could touch into that 110 area. We could even flash wick into 105. And as long as we just respect these bullish order blocks down here, again, especially that one above 100K, you know, this whole area is a little bit vague, okay? It's basically the top of the market back here, and we don't have to bounce off the tops of the wicks of the top of the previous little market area. Okay, I think people have that stereotype in their head where, you know, if you're not bouncing off of the exact top of the wick, somehow you've lost support. But that's not necessarily true. Okay, this whole area right here is basically a block of orders. This whole area right here is a block of orders. And, you know, we can logically extend this in our mind to understand that this whole zone right here is fuzzy. What was previously the top of the market could now become the bottom of the market in the next phase to the upside. And so that's our wiggle room. That's why we have to have that wiggle room between 115K and 100K. If you don't give yourself that wiggle room, you may be unfortunately over biased to the downside should we have some flash wicks in this area. Now, again, what could cause that shakeup? You know, it might be if Jerome Powell and President Trump go to war, right, over this issue of cutting interest rates. It could be if Powell gets fired and the financial markets just get super skittish and there's a flash crash. And then guess what, right? Like, just like with the Iran war, just like with the banking issue, right, a couple years ago or whatever, you know, maybe the market just buys it right up. Okay, because they still see potentially Bitcoin outperforming their dollars, or they see Bitcoin just outperforming the market in general. And also, you know, while this bullish sentiment is holding in Bitcoin, while we're holding this upper level, we can also see that Ethereum has just been on a tear. Okay, and so any type of check back in the market would really just give Ethereum a chance to cool off a bit. And again, you can see that it's going to be holding the top of its market, right? Here's the top of Ethereum's market. Here's the top of Ethereum's market. Yeah, of course, Ethereum has a little wiggle room to have a pullback and just make another bull flaggy formation, right? And so any type of consolidation in Ethereum that's bullish yet still impulsive on its own parabola that it's trying to establish would just be good for our altcoins. Guys, I think I'm going to end it there. If you joined in the group, guys, now I'm doing these Alpha Commission recordings in the group. If you ever want to just hang out with me while I make them, feel free to check out the link in the description of the video below. And then, of course, we can always have a community session afterwards to answer some of your questions. That's our Alpha for the day. Stay safe and happy trading.